Hebrews 10:14 says, "For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." This is episode 3 of our series on Daniel, and today we're going to be looking at what Christians call the sanctification of the believer. In blacksmithing, the word forging is used to describe the process of bending and shaping metal. It's a violent process that demands heat and hammers. It's a process designed to remove the impurities of dirty metal like slag and charcoal. God too forges his children. He allows us to be tried and tested, refined under the peer pressure of mankind, using everyday life to remove attitudes, emotions, and all kinds of thinking that is yet to be renewed in this life. This process of sanctification is not the means to sonship, but rather the result of it. So if you find yourself struggling with the circumstances of your life, the things that seem outside your control, this episode is for you. All right, good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Yep.
Good. How are
You didn't do the intro.
I was going to bring it in a little later. I was going to shake things up for you guys.
John, please leave this. This is too good.
Welcome to the Kavod Family Podcast. My name is Casey Wilson. We've got Travis Shook and Justin Bonner. Good morning, gents.
What's up?
Morning.
It has been it's been a good day. It's been a good morning. I want to talk about this morning's workout. We'll do it next week.
We'll get there. You'll hear about it in 2 to 3 weeks.
There you go. There's the teaser.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a good day?
Yeah. I mean, it's still early.
Yeah.
So
The day is going.
yeah.
Dude, I left this morning, and I'm going to rabbit trail just for a second before we jump into this. And last night my wife had asked me. She said, "Hey, would you be so kind? I can't do it. Can you run the cat? We've got this cat that was bit by something. It looks like it was mauled
Again?
Yeah, we've got this one cat. He used to be able to catch birds out of the sky and just, he'd kill them before they hit the ground.
Take a
that kind of
hint.
thing.
God doesn't want the cat around anymore.
And Erica, are you listening to that?
I'm just saying, God's doing all he can. Human responsibility.
But it got an infection on it's all chewed up on its backside. It got an infection. So she said, "Hey, can you run it down to the vet, drop it off? I can't do it. I don't have time. Just leave the thing." And so I go to pick it up this morning, and she didn't have the crate. She had loaned that to her sister-in-law. So I'm carrying the cat. It's clawing me to death. I'm bleeding everywhere. I throw it in my back seat. She leaves. I jump in the car. I start driving, and I'm in traffic now. I look back, and the cat's just peeing all over my back seat of my truck. And I hate this cat. It's been shaved. All its rear is shaved right now because of these wounds. It had to get cleaned. And it's peeing all over my truck, and I can't stop it. I can't pull over the truck. I can't get out of it. So finally got down to the vet, dropped the sucker off. And the whole time I'm like wanting to pick up the phone and call Erica and say, "Your cat's peeing all over my truck." Just out of rage, just out of anger, right?
Let her know.
But just let her know,
Let
your
her
cat,
know.
that kind of language. And I want you to know that I held back, and I have committed to never mention it, and she'll never hear about it unless she listens to this episode. And if you listen to this episode, we should probably just kill the cat and get rid of the cat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't call her. I just strangled it.
Yes. Anyway, that was my morning, and so I made it home to wash the truck, grab my stuff, and I got here right at 9:30 when we were scheduled to get in.
9:32.
On time, my friend. Well
So,
done.
Anyway, it was a wild morning. Did you guys have a good day?
Yeah, great.
You didn't have to
Nothing
deal
like
with that?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peaches and cream.
Just
compared
read
to
on
that.
Daniel.
Not
Yeah.
even fun. All right. Well, we're jumping into Daniel chapter 3. We've been going through this is the third part in a 4-part series on the life of Daniel, looking at his life, how God molds his identity, shapes his character and his calling, what he's called to do, his skill sets, and how God uses them in order to direct the people and save the people, literally save the people. And then there's this process in Daniel's story where him and his friends, they go through a great refining, a sanctification process for their own lives. It's a time where their character is put to the test, and they have to stand up for the sake of their God. And it cost them greatly. And then we'll get into next week. We're going to get into what we see as the leadership influence, that reigning portion of life, where you're actually imparting and discipling and mentoring and kind of pouring into that next generation of people. And Daniel's life next week when we jump into it. Daniel's much older. He's in his 80s. He's lived a good long life and he's been faithful. But that's kind of the narrative of where we're going in these 4 episodes.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else before we jump into this story?
Send it.
No,
All right. Well, I've been talking too much. Why don't one of you gentlemen give us a quick overview and outline of chapter 3? That's where we're going to be. Daniel chapter 3. This is for every man out there. Listen, if you've got a story like mine this morning, sanctification is just part of life. And there's going to be 1,000 things every day that happen that you can't control. And they're the kind of things that cause us to either lean on God or curse under our, curse the situation or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's really that moment where we have to decide, you know what? I live my life before the Lord, and that's what these gentlemen do. And they're extremely faithful, and their witness is incredible. Mm-hmm. It's an awesome story.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of what we majored on in the first episode was the reality that these 3 boys, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and Daniel, established and retained their identity as worshipers of Yahweh before they got to Babylon, right? Before their life really kicked up in terms of difficulty, in terms of just the reality of their day-to-day life, their new circumstance, they established their identity as worshipers of Yahweh, whether they were in Israel or whether they were in Babylon. Yeah. And so that was how it all started. And then as God led them into what he had for them in their life, because the overarching theme of the book of Daniel is the sovereignty of God over his people in seeing them through, right? I think that's the overarching theme. And so we see them resting in their identity as worshipers of God, and then God leading them into what he has for them. And with that comes testing, comes refining, as you said, that burning off of the dross, where the impurities in the gold it's melted down and the impurities float to the top, and it's scraped off and done away with, so that the gold can be refined and become pure. And that's what God's doing in us, and that's what God is doing in them. And we already saw that with Daniel, right? With interpreting the dream, with the diet in the beginning, and then interpreting the dream. And God equipping them to walk in the calling that he has for them when they are walking with their hearts his, right? That verse in 2 Chronicles, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, seeking those whom he can strongly uphold, those whose heart is completely his. And now we know, praise God, our hearts are not always completely his, but he's still gracious with us because of Christ and his full heart towards the Father. But I think that's another point. But here now we get to King Nebuchadnezzar is recognizing he's recognizing the reality of the difference between Daniel and these 3 boys and everybody else, right? Because this dream he had, he wanted it interpreted, and basically all of his wise men who would normally be able to handle this kind of thing all say it's not possible. And then Daniel shows up and says, it is possible, and here's what it is. I'll tell you the dream. 2. Yeah. I'll tell you the dream, and I'll tell you the interpretation. You didn't tell me the dream. I'll tell you what you dreamed in your mind at night, and then I'll tell you what it means. And so the king is starting to recognize the reality of God, of the one true living God, but he's still a pagan king in the midst of pagan gods and deities. And so now, as most kings do, they're always worshiped, right? And that's the theme, I think. I looked in this chapter when I was reading through it today. 11 times the word worship is used in this one chapter.
In chapter 3?
In chapter 3, 11 times the word worship is used.
Okay.
And so this chapter, as many of you know, if you know much about the word or you grew up in church, you'll know about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the golden statue and the fiery furnace, right? Yeah. This is a familiar story. But the point of this story is that resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. And tyranny is always about worship, right? The disobedience to God is always manifested in worship. I just finished the book of Joshua last night, laying in bed, and the whole problem, he ends with, God brought you across the river 3 rivers. He brought Abraham across a river into the land of Canaan to look at it. And then he brought the people of Egypt through the ocean when they fled Egypt. And then he brought them across the river Jordan into the land of Canaan. And in every moment there, the people are called to put off the old gods and follow the one true and living God. Right?
Okay, so slow down real quick. You said something powerful there. Resistance to tyranny. Go back to that real quick.
Yeah. I
Say
mean,
that
that's the whole point of this chapter is that resistance to tyranny, actual tyranny, is obedience to God.
That sounds like Knox. I'm trying to remember who that was.
That's John Knox. And he was around in the time of the Protestant Reformation. He was a contemporary of John Calvin. But the point of this book here is that there is going to come a time, the point of this chapter is that there is going to come a time, maybe every day it might feel like, that when you're walking in your calling, you are going to have to rest on your identity in God in order to be seen through the forging process of sanctification, which is exactly what you'll see here in the book of Daniel, because they're being elevated to reign, to lead. It says at the end of chapter 2 that Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. So he said, put in a good word for his buddies. They got elevated. They're now officials. And as soon as they become officials, the king makes an image of gold and says, everybody, he calls exactly these people, the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces. That's these 3 boys. So they're elevated in a position to lead and to teach and to be an example and represent Yahweh to the people. And then they're immediately put in a position where they need to rest in their identity in order to be seen through this refining process in the midst of their calling, right? And that's so important for us as men, because as soon as we believe we've been brought to the place that God wants us, when we run into a trial, we start to believe that we're in the wrong place. Right? Yeah. As soon as we step into our calling and we meet resistance from the world, the flesh, and the devil, we start to believe that we're walking out of God's will for us, when really God's will is for us to be refined within that calling.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's fatherhood, that's marriage. I mean, how many men don't feel like they can be good husbands just because they're butting up against the realities of life in a fallen world?
Yeah.
Right?
Oftentimes we make commitments to the Lord, or we take on responsibilities. Both of those are the same thing, right? We take on a responsibility, and as soon as it begins to get stressful, tense, there's pushback on it. You're right. There's too often we feel like, whoa, this isn't the will of God. I should turn and go another direction, rather than walk into it and embrace it and allow that sanctification to take place.
What's cool in this process is the boys, I'll call them, their identity was their foundation, right? And Daniel and the 3, and then the rest of the magicians and enchanters and all of that, were all going to die because they couldn't figure out this dream. So Daniel and his boys were put between a rock and a hard spot. Either we go to God and figure this out, or we're dead. Like there was just go to God and send it. There really wasn't another option, right?
Yeah, chapter 2.
Here in chapter 3, there's an option. Bend the knee, worship a false god, and live, or follow Christ and do what's right. Yes. So it's cool because all this was built on their identity. And this is like the next almost, the fire was turned. I'm not talking about actually the fire they were thrown into, but the heat was turned up. The persecution was turned up. Before, they had no option. You're dying. This is it. And they're like, yes, God intervened. Here it's like, choose worshiping someone besides God or choose God. There was an option. There was a gray area.
Yeah, and
they stuck to their guns.
Yeah, and that would be for us as we're processing this big narrative that we're going through. You know, in chapter 2, they have this calling that they have to walk out. They have a skill set, and all of a sudden an opportunity is presented to use that skill set.
Their skill set
and apply.
Was a gift from God. And because they stayed focused on Christ, they were elevated.
Yes.
And now they're elevated, there's an option.
Yes.
There's a pull.
I
could be like everybody else and blend in and not rock the boat, or I can stand on the thing that actually got me here. And I wasn't even trying to get here. I just fixated on Christ, and he put me here. And now I can go a different way, and the stakes are higher.
Yeah, I just had I had a good conversation with a dude named Levi, a new guy becoming a friend of ours. Shout out Raccoon Junk Removal for all your estate clean out needs.
Dude, that dude finds some gold. He was showing us those pages of
leaflets out of a Martin Luther German Bible translated from the great a Geneva Bible. Yeah, he had to send those back to the people, like they weren't his. But we were just talking last week at the Bible study. We were talking about surrender. Well, that's part of this. And he said, his daughter was born, one of his kids was born with some health issues, I think like a cleft palate. And he said, I felt good. I felt good surrendering that to God. And in hindsight, I think it was because I had no other choice. He said, but I don't do good surrendering things to God, like my business and like the things that I have an option with. Like anybody can surrender. Like
the thing you control, the hold. Right? Yeah, my hands up in the air like I'm holding something.
For those who are listening. Yeah. But it's easy to surrender things that are out of our control. You have no option but to go to God. You're all going to die. But whenever it's like, okay, well, we could get out of this. Like I do have a hand in this now. I can affect this to some degree like these guys. And really the picture, and we can get into the text, the point is, whenever all these officials are called and said, it needs to be published throughout the land that when you hear this blowing of this trumpet, we have this picture probably because of VeggieTales, that there was like millions of people gathered around this thing. And then they blew all these trumpets, and then everybody kneeled except for these three guys who were like, we're not going to do that. That's not what happened. What happened was this was an ongoing thing. Yeah. That every time you heard that, whatever you were doing, wherever you were, it's like almost like a tornado siren. That whenever you heard that, whatever you're doing, stop, bow the knee, and worship that golden image. Worship the king. Right? It didn't matter. No one came together to that site. It was a matter of in your ordinary life, when you hear that, you need to bow the knee. And what happened was that these three boys were going about their life, and the trumpet sounded, all the flute, the lyre, the trigon, all this sounds.
Don't forget the bagpipe.
And I did see the bagpipe right there. And then everybody kneels, and they just kept doing what they were doing. You know what I mean? You picture like washing dishes, and then these people kneel and they just keep washing dishes, like, okay, looking around, whatever they're doing, right? And they were ordinarily faithful in their ordinary life. Yeah. Like it wasn't this grand movie-like moment where they're in front of everyone and it's like, oh, kneel or don't kneel. They could have knelt quietly in their room. Yep. No one would have seen. And they could have knelt in their heart and said, God, I'm still yours. I still worship you, but I'm just going to do this so I don't die, because what you've called me to is predicated upon me being alive. And so for me to do your will, God, I'm going to have to bend the knee here.
What's crazy is it builds, right? So the maturity in the forging process and the ability to be able to reign and teach that to others, you need to be solid in it, solidified in it. So everything we just taught the last 6 months about it starts with us, starts with the inner man, us maturing that. If you look at David as a young man killed a lion and a bear when no one was around to protect the sheep. He could have been like, Dad, sorry, his lion came, ran off with one. And that was probably a normal thing. It wasn't ideal because that was their livelihood. But like, I don't expect Reed to go kill a lion to save a sheep. We just count our losses, right? But he learned who God was in that moment alone, and was confident in that. So whenever he was put on a public stage with Goliath, it was the same thing to him, right? So whenever Nebi finds out that they aren't bowing the knee, comes before him and is like, do it or you're going to die, they're like, nah, I'm okay. Like that resolve is built upon your fixation, and Justin keeps using the word worship. Worship is more than just singing a song. It's the thing that you're beholding, the thing that sits on the throne of your heart. It's not just the statue. Oh, they look at it. Yeah. It's not just like respecting the king. Like you can respect a king and not worship a king.
Yeah. If you go back to, Genesis 22, it's the first time the word worship is used in the Bible. And there it's the story of Abraham and Isaac. He takes his son up to the mountain. That's where he's going to strap him to the wood, kill his son, that part. but the word worship is used for the first time and the word love is used. Take your son, your only son whom you love, and take him up there. And so there's this idea that worship is taking the very thing that you love and adorning it, right? Giving recognition to it, like offering it up to the Lord and giving it to him so that way he knows there's nothing greater than him. And what these gentlemen are doing is saying that King Nebuchadnezzar is not greater than you. We worship you and you alone. And there's something in life, maybe we're just a much less religious people nowadays, but there's something about life that we are worshipers. We worship so much. If you ever go to a rock concert or you go to a basketball game, worship is just part of the culture. It's part of the crowd. You see people wearing people's jerseys. They walk in. I mean, this is a picture of worship, right? And yet when we think about worshiping God, all of a sudden we suppress that and we ignore it like it doesn't happen. No, people don't do that. No, we do. We've traded the worship of God for the worship of his creation. These dudes are saying, no, I'm not going to worship the creation, this created image that you made, which represents mankind, which was created. Yeah. I'm going to worship the very thing that created all things. Mm-hmm. And so they have this conviction. And if we could do this, man, if you're listening, this really does come back to, do you have a private, intimate relationship with God to where you believe the God of heaven and earth is in relationship with you and your actions matter? You have to make choices daily and you get to worship him rather than worship creation. Like on a daily. I love the way you put it, because it's never going to be this large gathering they call you to, and all of a sudden they're going to say, hey, would the Christians stay standing while everyone else sits? That's not how it's going to go. It's going to be throughout your day as you pick and choose the movies you watch, the music you listen to, the things you say, the way you teach, the people you interact with. It's your private life that you get to offer unto the Lord as a living sacrifice. That's Romans 12, right? Yeah. We get to do that. And that's the picture that these men, what they're doing.
Well, the whole Old Testament pictured worship as sacrifice, right? The entire Old Testament. And we know now, because of Christ coming, that he was the ultimate sacrifice, right? The vision of the Lamb standing as though slain in Revelation. But what we miss is that New Testament Christian worship is still sacrifice. It's just a matter of now all of our life is a sacrifice to God.
Yes.
It's laying upon the altar the inclinations of the old man in us and letting that become sanctified until what we want to do becomes what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
The problem is that so many times we buck against what God wants us to do because we're listening to the voice of the old man that's crucified with Christ. And we're forgetting the part that it's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And now Hebrews 13, through him, then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name. Now we acknowledge Christ in every situation. We acknowledge God in our interactions, no matter where we go, in business, in politics, in what restaurant we go to, in who we talk to, in the way that we live our lives. We're acknowledging Christ and his lordship over those things, and we're living a life of sacrifice. And so worship is yes, specific to worshiping together on the Lord's day with the people of God, but it is also general in the sense of your life is a living sacrifice, Romans 12:1 again, in the way that you offer up your wants to God so that he can then change them into his wants, right? And the more you become conformed to that, the more you're conformed into the image of his son, and the more potent your witness is in the world. And that's exactly what's happening here in Daniel, is that they're taking their wants, which is to not die, and they're putting that on the altar and saying, whatever you say is what I want, regardless of who lives around me. And that comes from a place of conviction. That comes from a place of waking up in the morning and still believing the same thing you believed when you went to bed last night and not caring if other people believe it. right? Like that comes from a place of, yes, being loving, right? Let all that you do be done in love. Yes and amen. But the loving thing for them to do here is to evangelize Nebuchadnezzar by metaphorically giving him the finger when he says, worship me. They say, no. I mean, that's what they say here. They do not lie. They don't beat around the bush. They even call him, O king, respectfully. And they say in verse 18, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, he gave him another chance. He said, look, I like you guys. I like Daniel. Daniel's the one that wanted you up here.
Let's pause real quick. Give a quick recap. So he made a statue. Music goes off. You're supposed to, the Chaldeans and everybody sell out that these three aren't worshiping.
Complain.
They go and say that. Yeah.
King gets mad. King brings him up and is like, you better do it. And then.
Yeah, the complaint was these dudes don't pay attention to you. They don't acknowledge your word. They're ignoring the king, right? They have not done what you've asked us to do, to worship this image.
And then
they're literally not even paying attention to this. It was like the order was given and they just went, not happening. And they just went about their day. Like it was like a resolve in that moment. Ain't gonna do it. And they move on. So whatever happens. They've already resolved.
And what's powerful, right before what they say, which is one of the most gangster lines in the whole Bible, but right before that, Nebuchadnezzar says, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, verse 14, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I set up? There's worship again. Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I've made, well and good. Is what it says. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? He says, it'll all be okay. Your life will be good if you don't worship. Or if you worship. I'll forget about that. I'll forget about, you guys totally blatantly disrespecting me and my offense. I'll overlook that if you'll just bow the knee. Like, you can go about your life. You can be as Jewish as you want, but you have to bow to this. You can do whatever you want. But then what they say, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. We're already saying more than we need to say.
That is such a good line. We don't have an answer for you.
We have no need to answer you. We don't need to answer you. If this be so, that we're going to get thrown in if we don't do it, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. He is able, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. He can and he will, but if not, be it known to you, O king.
Pause right there real quick. So right before this, you had talked about our worship, our sacrifice is laying our life on the altar for him. This is that right here.
Yeah, especially what they're about to say.
Yeah. They say, our God is able. That's faith. He will deliver us. That's hope. But if not, and I believe this is love, but if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you've set up. Yep. He can deliver us. He will deliver us. And even if he doesn't deliver us in the way that you're thinking we want to be delivered, we're still not going to bow. And that's the moment that they are lovingly evangelizing King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
They're not telling him, you turn around and worship Yahweh. Yeah. What they're saying is we're not going to do that.
And so let's bring that back, circle to the comment that you made earlier from Knox, right? To say it again, I'm blinking.
Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God.
Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. And so when your resolve is to obey God, when that's what's set and fixed in your heart, and you see authorities in the land that go against that, to resist that is the right thing to do. It is obedience to God. That is good and right and holy. What they're doing here is good and right and holy. And when they were submitting to the king in chapters 1 and 2 and honoring him and respecting him and going about their way, they were doing the right thing. It was when the king called and demanded that they worship another thing. That's when they said, this is enough. That's the line. Your tyranny no longer, right? We serve a God that is greater than you. That is an awesome moment.
I mean, worship of idols and false gods is what got them in Babylon in the first place. And what they're doing right here is that they're severing generational curses of their fathers who were unwilling to stand with steel spines like Peter at the day of Pentecost and proclaim that there's only one God, there's only one way to be made right with him, right? That they're breaking this cycle, and sometimes it's going to take really difficult standing moments to break off the inheritance that you've been leaning on, right, of your father being a pagan idol worshiper or not being the best father that he could have been, right? You're going to have to take that crutch you've been carrying and chuck it into the fire, right? And stop leaning on that and cut that off so that now you can walk in the fullness of what God has for you. I mean, how many guys are limping still? Well, I'm just kneeling because that's what my dad did. Right. Well, I'm just kneeling before Nebuchadnezzar's idol because that's what we do. That's what we do as the nation of Israel.
And it's easy to do if you're not in your word and you're not vigilant and watchful, because you could easily overlook, like, that's not a big deal. Like, I love God. I'm just doing this because he said, I don't really believe that. I don't really worship that. I'm just doing it. But there's a principle behind it. There's a resolve behind it. Like, and it's so easy to be deceived if you're not in it.
I had a good friend. He's an older gentleman. I call him a friend because he became that in my life. We spent enough time together that there was a true love and respect. Like, he'll still text me on my birthday, happy birthday, Casey. This guy's 80 plus years old. Just an awesome, awesome man. His name's Burkett Farrell. He's a wonderful guy. But I was sitting having lunch with him one day, and I remember him. His words were always they just struck home. And he said, Casey, we're having a conversation like this, going back and forth, and he looks at me and he says, Casey, I've already resolved. I've already decided to obey God. I just need to hear him now. I just need to be presented with the moment to obey him.
To choose it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have resolved. And so whatever fork comes, I already know which way I'm going. I just got to see.
Yep.
I just got to know.
And so many times I try to pray and ask for wisdom in that, because my resolve is to choose him. But there's been plenty of times, whether I'm busy or not spending time with him, that I don't hear him and I take the wrong turn. And I'm like, God, if I do, make something so obvious to get my attention, because I genuinely don't want to.
Yeah.
And as a good father, he sees your heart in that, and he's like, hey, focus. You're getting, and you've got these different, we've talked about this in other podcasts, speed bumps, guardrails, whatever you want to say, that kind of get your attention on when you're going too quick or coasting. But that's true. Like, these guys didn't. I mean, even back into the story, Nebi gets mad, turns up the fire 7 times more. He gets his guards to go throw him into the fire. The guards get burned, and they're not even in the fire. The 3 go in, they're fine. And Nebi's like, I see a 4th guy walking with them. And I'm rushing through this because the main point is, right at the very end, Nebuchadnezzar says, and people in nation or language that speak anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid to ruins, for there is no God who is able to rescue in that way. Then the king promoted them to the province of Babylon. So the idea that, like, they lovingly, with resolve, stood faithful to Christ to the point of death. God saved them, and it witnessed to the king, and the king made a decree, this is the only God. Theirs is the only one. And then he promotes them again.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about. For us, modern day Christians today, post Jesus Christ crucified on the cross, especially living in American culture, we look at things like Matthew 28, the Great Commission, and we always think forward. Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey the Lord, baptize them. That process, we're looking forward as if, okay, now this is what we're doing. Teaching the nations is what God has always been doing. And what's taking place, if you look at the big meta narrative, what's going on, you have his people, his chosen people. Go back through 1 Kings, Chronicles, read through it. His chosen people that have rebelled and turned to foreign gods. And so what he's going to do is, like a loving father, discipline them by removing them from the household of comfort and placing them in the wilderness. And while they're in the wilderness, 2 things that are going to happen. 1, he's going to turn the hearts of his people back to him. He's using Daniel, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the other contemporaries of Daniel at the time in this 70-year period that's been prophesied to turn the hearts of the people back to God. And at the same time, he's beginning to witness to the nations. Yep. That is awesome. Here's a foreign king that is bending his knee. This started with you bend your knee for me, and now this foreign king is bending his knee for the God of heaven and earth.
And that's honestly, let's just be real here. This is something that we've all been dancing around, is the fact that there's a lot of soft-handed Christians, and that might not be in Franklin per se, but there's a lot of soft-handed Christian voices that are very okay with the subversive, inside-out grassroots movement of the gospel changing places, but they're not comfortable with the fact that the gospel changes places based on sometimes civil disobedience to tyrannical kings. 2 weeks ago, John MacArthur was called home to glory. Faithful man of God. I don't agree with him on every single thing, but that doesn't matter, right? He pastored faithful. The same church for 50 years. And 20 years ago, he said you should do whatever the government says and don't ruffle feathers. And when COVID-19 happened and the government said, you can't worship God, bow the knee to science, bow the knee to Gavin Newsom, bow the knee to whoever it is, right? John MacArthur, they closed their church for 2 weeks. They said, we're going to obey the king. And then they said, strike that. We're not going to obey the king. Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. And they stood and they opened their doors and they were taken to court by the state of California. And they won the court. They won the battle in court.
In California.
Right? In California. Yeah. Right? In the Communist Republic of California. They won the battle, Casey's homeland, the motherland. There
are remnants, my friend.
They won the battle in California, right? And that was a witness to California, to the power of the gospel over the fear of man. But yet there's so many Christians who want to tiptoe around and pretend like we have to just do everything that the world tells us to do because Jesus was gentle and lowly, right? They want to take one verse and try to make an entire theology about passivity, when in reality, Jesus was the most active in the fact that every day he got up, he lived an obedient, faithful life to the Father on behalf of the bride, sacrificing himself daily. And when wolves came to pull away the sheep, he flipped tables and whipped people in the face.
Yep.
Like that's Jesus Christ, the one who allowed murder to be the means of our reconciliation, right? And who will return with a robe dipped in blood, with a thigh tattoo and a sword coming out of his mouth, riding on a white horse, right? Like, that's the picture, and I think that it's so easy for us to look at the way in which the gospel changes a place as only in one way, one-dimensional. But oftentimes, you don't know who is looking on when you are standing firm for the gospel, right? Whenever you are standing for God, when you are living for God, when you are sacrificing for him with your life, you have no idea who is seeing you do that and who is being spurred on to stand for him also.
Because of your faithfulness.
Yes, because of your faithfulness, because of your obedience. We have no idea. And it's radicalism. It's radicalism. It's ordinary Christian radicalism, right? The obedience to God is oftentimes resistance to tyranny. And what they do here is they stand up and they say, we're not going to do it. They're thrown into the fire. The Lord preserves them. And then how does it end? Exactly the way Casey said. It started with, y'all worship me, and it ended with, I'll worship him.
Oh, man. It's
right?
So
like
good.
that, it's poetic. And then this king in chapter 4, verse 3, has better theology than most of the Christians you're going to bump into most days. But how great are his signs, how mighty is his wonders, his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. I mean, he ends with, he's God. That doesn't mean he renounced the other gods necessarily, because we know he gets a little flaky, right? But there's a reality to where he says, this God is the God. And it's so important that we recognize the time, like the men of Issachar, men who understand the times and recognize that in your day-to-day life, you are going to have opportunities to resist the allurement of the world, to get along and go along, to say, well, it'll be well and good if I just do this, right? If I just, in front of my friends, I just act this way,
right.
It'll all be well and good. But we need to be men like these three boys who, even though we feel like we're in a foreign land, we feel like we're in a bad situation, yet we say, he can deliver me, he will deliver me because he loves me, because of Christ. And even if he doesn't, I'm not doing that thing,
yep.
right? I am not going to bow my knee and worship anyone. Love the Lord your God, him alone shall you worship. Yep. Don't go back to Egypt, but worship and serve God in whatever situation you're in, and let him take care of the breadth of your ministry. You take care of the depth of obedient sacrifice, and he'll take care of the breadth of your influence.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's fair. I love what you're saying. Just to clarify, we're not asking you guys, if you get pulled over for speeding, we're not asking you to resist handing over a driver's license because you're a citizen of heaven and not of North Carolina. That is not Christian radicalism. Yeah. Okay. This is not stop paying your taxes and just
render to Caesar what is Caesar's. Right?
What we're saying is that there really is, and if you open your eyes and if you walk with God, there are moments all the time where God is calling us and enabling us, giving us platforms to worship and give him credit. Maybe in your profession, there's something that you're getting asked to do, and it goes deeply against your convictions. Maybe you're a doctor and you're being asked to do things that you know are not right. Maybe you're a computer programmer and you're programming software for things that are ungodly and unrighteous. You are called to close that down and stand up and say, I can no longer do this. Maybe there's things taking place in your business that you know do not please the Lord, and you are the chief, the head of that house. You are called to say, you know what? As for me and my household, as for me and my business, as for me and my people, we are going to serve the Lord. And the conviction to do that, it begins with us, and we lead rightly when we do those things, right? God is enabling and giving us opportunities to where simple obedience of worship like this get to a place to where all of a sudden a man with great pride humbles himself and makes a decree to where all the people can no longer speak ill of the God of heaven and earth. You can't write this plan in the cave. Like, how do we get the people to worship God, to stop cursing his name, to stop taking the name of the Lord Lord God in vain? How do we do this? They couldn't have come up with this plan, but God had it. Why? Because he's sick of the nations taking his name in vain, and he wants them to worship him. Why? Because he's good and he's loving and he's kind and he's just. And it is sin to worship false gods. It is painful, it is hurting, and it is damaging, and it is destroying cultures when we turn to other gods. That's just what takes place. But when we turn to God, he heals the nations. That's what he does. And so simple obedience, trusting God with the plan, resolving early, I'm going to obey and I'm going to worship. I'm going to be respectful, but I'm going to worship. Make that resolve. Let God create the plan for you.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
That sounds good.
That's it?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that
it was sent.
I want to keep cluttering the end of that.
Oh, well, listen, sanctification, we talk about it all the time, but in your life, in your place of business, and even in your home, especially men, I mean, every day you get the opportunity when you wake up to make a choice. This house belongs to God. And the things that my wife and my children or my home do, the activities that take place within these walls, we are going to set them apart to the Lord. When you finish your day and when you gather with your children, you get to bless his name and thank God for the day and say, thank you, Father, for this food and this meal and for this time together as a family. You get to offer your day up to the Lord every day. Sanctification is a part of every single day. Don't make light of it. Let it become all-consuming in your life to where God's Spirit and his cleansing holiness takes over in everything that you do. Daniel does it. These three men, the bros do it. They're faithful to it. And God works wonders in their life because of it. Amen.
Amen?
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed this. It's the Kavod Family Podcast. Enjoy.